Black Dahlia. Episode 20. Walter Bayley. Dr. Walter Alonzo Bayley is the last suspect we will be looking at, and to many, he is one of the prime suspects, although he never came under police investigation after the murder. Bayley came under scrutiny in 1996 when Los Angeles Times copy editor and sometimes reporter Larry Harnisch was investigating the Black Dahlia murder for a proposed 50th anniversary article. After interviewing FBI profiler John Douglas for the article, Harnisch started looking into the neighborhood after Douglas suggested the killer had a connection to the location. For more profiles, including those of John Douglas, see Episode 9 Killer Profiles. Harnisch focused on the history of the Leimert Park neighborhood, especially along Norton Avenue. Although nothing incriminating came from Harnisch's initial investigation, he started receiving information from other researchers. One day, he received a large box containing hundreds of documents and other articles related to the Black Dahlia murder. Included among these documents was a copy of the marriage certificate of Beth's sister, Virginia, Ginny, short to her husband Adrian West. Investigating the marriage certificate, he found that a witness to the wedding, a one Barbara Lindgren, who listed her address as 3959 Norton Avenue, which was only about a block from the Beth Short body dump site. Digging deeper, he found that Barbara Lindgren had served at the wedding as a matron of honor, and the name on the deed for 3959 Norton Avenue was listed as Ruth Bayley. Barbara Lindgren and Beatrice Thurber were married names of the adopted daughters of Ruth Bayley and her husband, Walter Bayley. As it turned out, Walter Bayley had been a prominent surgeon, a surgeon who had specialized in treating female medical problems, including performing mastectomies and hysterectomies. Harnisch did track down Barbara Lindgren. See full details of the complete Harnisch investigation in the article linked below on crimereads.com, by Miles Corwin. The article also appeared on the website Delacorte Review. But Lindgren did not seem to have been a close friend of Virginia. She said of the wedding and that she served as matron of honor.
Because there wasn't anybody else.
So, who was Walter Bayley? Is he the most viable suspect yet, or just another possibility? Walter Alonzo Bayley was born on March 25, 1880, however, I can find no location of birth. His death certificate just lists place of birth as California. He had 3 siblings, Edgar, Alvin, and Mabel. In June 1905, he graduated from the University of Southern California Medical School. He married Ruth A. Chase on July 27, 1907, and on the marriage certificate he already listed his place of residence as Colfax, New Mexico. Walter and Ruth had one son, Walter Prescott Bayley, born in Dawson, New Mexico on January 13, 1909. There in Dawson, Bayley worked as a surgeon. Dawson, at the time, was a growing mining town. The Phelps Dodge Corporation that operated the mines, provided homes for miners, as well as a hospital, department store, movie theater, and outdoor recreation that included a swimming pool and golf course. If the Bayley family was still living in Dawson in 1913, Bayley would have been present for the first of 2 major mining disasters to rock Dawson. On October 22, 1913, an explosion erupted in Stag Canyon Mine No. 2. 286 miners reported for work that morning, but only 23 survived the blast. At that time, the Stag Canyon Mine disaster was the second largest mining disaster in the United States. The Phelps Dodge Corporation shut down operations in Dawson in 1950, and it soon became a ghost town. On April 28, 1918, Bayley enlisted in the United States Marine Corps, and entered service in World War I with the rank of private. But he quickly rose through the ranks, being honorably discharged as a captain on July 24, 1919. The family moved into a home at 1216 West 48th Street in Los Angeles. They would call it home until 1930. At some point, Walter and Ruth adopted 2 daughters, Barbara and Beatrice. Tragedy struck on August 6, 1920, when Walter Prescott Bayley was hit by truck while riding his bike. The official cause of death was from fracture to the vault of the skull due to automobile accident. According to the article on crimereads.com, the boy died trying to warn his sister of crossing the busy street when a truck struck him instead. A newspaper quote from Walter Bayley is included.
Walter was our only son, the only child of our flesh and blood. Our hearts and soul were wrapped up in him. I have seen much of death, but I never understood it before.
Walter Bayley's further professional history was as chief of staff at Los Angeles County General Hospital, and later as associate professor of surgery at USC. He also opened a private practice at the professional building at 1052 West 6th Street, downtown Los Angeles, which was only 5 blocks from the Biltmore Hotel. In 1935 the family moved into a newly built home at 4546 Circle Boulevard until about 1942, when they moved to the 3959 South Norton Avenue address. I wonder what the reason was for the move after a fairly short time. The Circle Boulevard home was a larger, far more lavish location. Was he already starting to experience a downward spiral of both his professional and personal lives that would plague him until his death? In the early 1940s Bayley brought a partner into his medical practice, and this partner would be far more than his business partner. Alexandra von Partyka, full name Alexandra Flora Maria von Partyka, who would sometimes be known as Alice Field, was born in Vienna on May 6, 1908. She graduated from the University of Vienna and she lived for a time in Shanghai, China before immigrating to the United States as a refugee from Kobe, Japan on August 22, 1940. When she met Walter Bayley, she was working as a nurse while pursuing her medical degree. Walter Bayley not only took the medical student under his wing, he took her into his bed. It is unknown whether Bayley was already beginning to suffer from the medical ailments that would take a dire toll on the man in the last few years of his life, but the new love affair would obviously take a toll on his marriage. And his new lover would quickly see her opening, taking advantage of his marital troubles, and digging her claws in not just his practice, but in his estate. What is known about the pair is that they truly made an odd couple. There was the obvious age difference, but for what they lacked in commonalities due to the age gap, they made up for in other ways. They had a bizarre habit of watching films showing medical examinations and experimental surgical procedures while dining. While it wouldn't be uncommon for medical professionals to keep abreast of current scientific knowledge, doing so while eating dinner seems to be more like the television and movie cliché of medical examiners conducting autopsies with a scalpel in one hand and a sandwich in the other. Around this time, Bayley began suffering from numerous medical conditions. His death certificate listed recent and old myocardial infarctions due to generalized arteriosclerosis with obliterative arteriosclerosis of coronary and cerebral arteries. But it also listed another condition, encephalomalacia, a softening and loss of brain tissue due to liquefactive necrosis. Encephalomalacia is usually caused by cerebral infarction, cerebral ischemia, infection, craniocerebral trauma, or other injury. Here are excerpts from an article published in the Industrial Psychiatry Journal by byJnanamay Dawson and Shailly Yadav titled, Psychosis in a Case of Encephalomalacia.
In adults with encephalomalacia, rare case reports are available who presented with psychiatric morbidities in the form of progressive mental decline, borderline dementia, features of depression, delusion, and atapism. Here, we present a case of encephalomalacia in an adult female who presented with psychiatric symptomatology suggestive of psychosis. She would become irritable on trivial issues. She would get aggressive and would even attack her family members without any provocation. She stopped talking to people but rarely would talk to the family members only. On being questioned, she would either remain mum or would answer in few words, which would not make much sense to others. She would often use abusive language without any reason. She would not participate in her routine chores and need assistance even for her personal care. On several occasions, she was found talking to self, occasionally laughing without any reason, and crying to self. She would hardly ask for food and need to be fed under supervision. There was no precipitating factor. There was no history suggestive of any substance abuse, anxiety, panic, obsession, compulsion, phobia, depression, unconsciousness, seizures, or any trauma. Her premorbid functioning revealed no abnormality. In the past, there was no history suggestive of any psychiatric illness, seizures, and head injury. In her family history too, nothing significant could be detected. The cases presented with schizophrenia-like psychosis and had more widespread brain damage on neuroimaging, especially in the left temporal and right parietal regions. They were more impaired cognitively too. In our case, encephalomalacia in MRI of the brain was located in the bilateral temporal and basifrontal region. The study on head injury indicated that patients with lesions limited to ventromedial frontal lobes showed more aggressive and violent behaviors compared to that of the patients with non-frontal head injuries. We emphasize behavioral abnormalities and the importance of imaging of the brain in case of adult patients with psychotic manifestations, even in the absence of a history of head injury, neurological symptoms, and signs. Further studies are needed with more cases to establish a correlation between encephalomalacia of various parts of the brain and the type of psychiatric morbidities.
There is a link to the complete article below. It is unknown what part of Bayley's brain was damaged due to encephalomalacia, but Larry Harnisch attempted to acquire documents. According to the article on crimereads.com, Larry Harnisch tried to get copies of autopsy reports from the VA, but was denied because they are federal documents. He then went to Professor Emeritus of Neurobiology at the University of California, Irvine School of Medicine, Dr. James Fallon, for a consultation on the condition. Dr. Fallon told him that he thought Bayley's condition may have been due to
frontotemporal dementia from a series of little strokes. With this condition, you could see a radical change in personality. The drive for violence and sexuality can come up and get worse and worse. But it wouldn't necessarily affect his sensory or motor skills, and he could still do surgeries. So, the pathology lines up.
Harnisch also speculates that Bayley may have been suffering from Alzheimer's disease at the time. While this is all speculative without access to the original autopsy documents, this does seem to fit with Bayley's drastic change in behavior over the last few years of his life. He lost his chief of staff position at Los Angeles County Hospital as well as his associate professor of surgery position at USC. The most drastic change was that he left his wife and family, and filed for divorce. As seen on his death certificate listed as his home address, 1052 West 6th Street, he moved into his office at the professional building. But he also shacked up with Partyka at the address. The final sign that Partyka may have been manipulating the man during his struggles with increasing medical issues was that Bayley disinherited his wife, although Ruth and daughter Beatrice continued to stay at the Norton Avenue residence. But what else was Partyka doing with or without the help of Walter Bayley? The professional building at 1052 West 6th Street was long suspected as being a place where illegal medical procedure, including abortions, were performed. Let's return to the investigations of Charles Stoker in his book Thicker and Thieves to look into this location. Stoker said on pages 146, 147, and 148.
An organized abortion ring was operating within the city of Los Angeles, headed by a Dr. Audrain, he said. This inspector and others intuitively felt that its doctors were being protected by a very unique method. Actually, any person outside the ring was directly shaken down by homicide detectives of the police department, working through a setup that was maintained for that particular purpose. He detailed the medical board's method of operation. Upon receipt of a complaint or information that abortions were being performed by doctors, chiropractors, midwives or others, the board would make an investigation. Although it had powers to make arrests, the board's policy was to furnish information to the Homicide Bureau of the Los Angeles Police Department, or to the district attorney's office, and to allow those two law enforcement agencies to effect the arrests. After conviction of the abortionist, the medical board would go to the state with the information and the supporting results of the conviction and would then take action against the implicated physicians or other persons licensed by the state who were involved. To this inspector and to others it appeared that when positive and conclusive information or evidence were conveyed to their immediate superior, even if an arrest were made, it was smothered and no action was taken. 2. It appeared that when they themselves were working on the case,
the guilty doctors were invariably tipped off if they were members of the protected abortion ring. However, when information was obtained on some doctor outside the clique, or on someone who was without funds, in almost every instance a prosecution and a conviction would result. Their purpose in meeting me was to enlist my aid at that particular time. Inasmuch as their superior was on his vacation, they felt that anything they could accomplish while he was away would keep them from having to go through the police homicide squad. They wanted me to function secretly in place of the homicide squad. I knew that I would be sticking my neck out by entering this protected phase of police work. I went to Lieutenant Ed Blair, in charge of Vice, and told him that the state inspectors wanted me to help them. I informed Blair quite frankly that they suspected homicide officers of taking payoffs to protect the abortion ring. Blair advised me to go ahead, but reminded me to take it easy. He didn't want to become involved. A smart officer. The medical board men then told me that they knew the identity of a woman who had gone to the suspected Dr. Audrain, who, incidentally, was the purported head man in the ring. They suggested that I obtain the services of a policewoman, who could go to the doctor, pose as a pregnant woman, and give the name of their informant as a reference for the purpose of having Dr. Audrain perform an abortion on her. I told policewoman Audrey Davis none of the particulars of this case other than to state exactly what I wanted her to do. We arranged the details and she went to the doctor's office. The nurse gave her a casual examination. Perhaps I should make it clear that any woman who goes to an abortionist, whether or not she is pregnant, will be told that she is pregnant and that an abortion should be performed. Policewoman Davis was given an appointment for the latter part of the following week. She was directed to bring $250 with her and to come early. The appointment hour was 7:30 a.m. We knew that doctors performing abortions usually handled them in their offices between the hours of midnight and 9 a.m. At the appointed hour, Officer Ruggles, the policewoman, and I met the two inspectors from the state medical board. The inspectors were down in the mouth. "Sergeant, the deal is all shot to hell," one of them exclaimed. He added that their boss had returned from his vacation the day before and that they wouldn't dare proceed without first telling him. The other remarked that, although he had been told to go ahead, he well knew that the doctor was probably in Old Mexico by now. Being unacquainted with all the facts, I was consequently unconvinced. "What the hell," I retorted. "Let's take a chance. What have we got to lose?" I ordered policewoman Davis to keep the appointment. We planned to allow her 30 minutes in the office at 6th and St. Paul Streets. Miss Davis left. A few minutes later, the three officers and I followed her into the building. We found the doors of the medical offices tightly locked. With the exception of two nervous customers waiting in the hall, the place was deserted. Then I was convinced that the medical inspectors were right. The planned raid had been tipped off. To satisfy my own curiosity, I checked throughout the following week, and to my knowledge the good doctor never returned. The incident seemed to be closed, and I erased the abortion racket from my mind, since it was outside of my duties.
Although I believe that Audrain was innocent of being an abortionist, as explained in episode 16, Stoker may have been right about the location. There had to be a reason for so many allegations of abortions being done at this building. Larry Harnisch says that Bayley was not an abortionist due to his prominent standing as a doctor in the Los Angeles community and thus had too much to lose, but remember that Bayley had lost both of his prominent positions at the LA County Hospital and USC by this time. When you factor in the bad influence of Partyka and his deteriorating medical condition, I don't think he would have cared about his professional reputation. Harnisch also says that Bayley's secretary said nothing illicit happened at Bayley's practice. However, Bayley and Partyka both lived at the office and could have done abortions at any time, and even if they didn't live there, they wouldn't have performed illegal abortions during regular business hours anyway. Now let's look at how Larry Harnisch sees Beth Short as fitting into this. He speculates that Beth's sister Virginina and her husband Adrian may have mentioned the Bayley family to Beth and that the Baileys might be able to help her out if she needed it. And on the cold, lonely night of January 9, 1947, Beth possibly remembered and called the doctor, whose office was a short walk from the Biltmore. Once she showed up at Bayley's office, Beth told him the same lies and sob stories that had worked in the past, only she took it a step too far when she claimed to have had a child who died. Bayley, who was suffering from drastic, sometimes violent mood swings, might have seen through her lie, and having a traumatic flashback to his son's death, flown into a rage and murdered her. He then bisected and placed her corpse in the neighborhood a short distance from the Norton Avenue house where his wife and daughter were staying, a location that was a well-known dumping ground for the local Leimert Park residents. Remember what John Douglas said in his profile of the Black Dahlia killer? If not, see Episode 9, Killer Profiles. Douglas suggested the killer posed Beth's body in that neighborhood because he wanted to put the fear of God in that neighborhood. Bayley had the deeply personal connection to the location that motivated him to do just that. Detractors to the Bayley did it theory suggest that Bayley's age and condition would have made it impossible for him to have done it. Although I can't speak for Bayley's condition at the time of the murder, I don't buy that argument for all older people. Age doesn't necessarily show someone's strength or lack thereof. I work with or have worked with people Bayley's age and even older, and I work with teenagers. Some of the older people I work with work harder and longer hours than the teenagers. And I've known enough people who worked in nursing homes who have told me stories of elderly residents flying into rages, kicking, punching, biting, and scratching, sometimes needing to be physically restrained. As already established, Bayley possibly had a medical condition that caused him to fly into extreme rages, and a bisected body the size and weight of Beth Short would not have been that hard to move. Did Bayley do it? Who knows? If he did he have help? I think so. Was that help Dr. Alexandra von Partyka? I think so. And so does Warren Thorngate. Who is Warren Thorngate, you ask? Walter Bayley was his great-uncle. One day while following up on leads, Larry Harnisch contacted Thorngate for information. What followed was a series of communications that helped fill in a lot of blanks for both men. Details can be found in the online PDF published by Thorngate, see the link below. Where Thorngate and Harnisch differ is how much Partyka had to do with the murder. Although Harnisch mentions her, the crime is done by Bayley and Bayley alone. Thorngate suggests that Bayley and Partyka were doing, as others have mentioned, illegal abortions and other medical procedures, and that Beth may have died during a procedure. I think that both men were on to something. Thorngate for the reasons Beth went to Bayley's practice. And Harnisch for the motivation of the murder. Remember the previous episode where I related the stories of Dr. Schwartz and Fought and who they called the Lady in Red, who had Fought treat her for an inflamed gland? I do not think this woman was Beth, although the doctors and other staff claimed that the woman resembled pictures of the Black Dahlia. This woman seemed way too promiscuous to be Beth. However, Beth did possibly have a connection to the office, maybe leading to confusion due to resemblance. Mark Hansen did say that he drove Beth to Dr. Schwartz's office, but Schwartz was a dentist practicing out of the same office as Fought, who was a medical doctor, and it has been established that Beth did have bad teeth, leading to more possible confusion in misidentifying another woman who bore a resemblance to Beth. But that said, Dr. Fought was known to treat women suffering from such conditions. It has been speculated that Beth suffered from problems with her Bartholin glands. It is known that Beth was not sexually comfortable around men. If she needed treatment for a sensitive medical condition, she would have gone somewhere where she would have felt comfortable, somewhere with a known family connection. Even though Beth did not have much contact with her sisters, she wrote her mother frequently, and her mother could have passed on the information about Virginia's friend's father who was a doctor whose practice treated women's conditions, including performing mastectomies and hysterectomies. Beth would have been even more comfortable going to Bayley if she found out that his medical partner was a woman. But Beth would not have been so brutally defaced by her death due to a botched medical procedure. Remember the established cause of death stated by Dr. Newbar that Beth's cause of death was due to hemorrhage and shock due to concussion of the brain and lacerations of the face. The defilement of Beth's face was the cause of her death. It wasn't done after her death to possibly cover up that she had died during a surgical procedure. It would have been highly unlikely for someone to die during treatment for a disorder of the Bartholin glands, possibly afterwards due to infection, but probably not during the procedure. Of course, if the missing weak witnesses were mistaken in identifying Beth, her being treated for an infection caused during a botched medical procedure could account for that time between the 9th and when her body was discovered on the 15th. Bayley could have flown into a rage during that time for any reason and taken it out on his ill patient. Bayley and Partyka would both have had reasons to place Beth where she was found. Bayley to get back at his wife for their failed marriage and the death of their son, not to mention the daughter still living at home who might have been the sister young Walter Prescott Bayley was warning about the traffic at the very moment a truck hit him. And Partyka would have wanted to place the fear of God into her sexual rival and her rival for the control of Bayley's estate. The bisection could have been done to make it easier to transport and place the body parts at the scene. And could also have been done as an experiment to test their surgical prowess by performing what Dr. Newbar referred to as a fine piece of surgery. After all, if they studied medical films and experimental procedures while eating dinner, they probably wouldn't have put a perfectly good cadaver to waste without practicing on it. And bisecting a body for the sole purpose of making it easier to dispose of could have been crudely done with any cutting instrument. It would not have to have been a fine piece of surgery. Walter Bayley died on January 4, 1948 due to bronchopneumonia. His death set the stage for a court battle between Ruth and Partyka over control of his estate. Ruth said that Partyka used unnatural flattery and feminine wiles to control Walter and that she held him as a virtual prisoner. She also said that Partyka threatened to expose Bayley for some professional secrets that would have ruined. These secrets were never revealed. The estate in contention was valued at $200,000. But Ruth was also seeking $15,000 worth of office equipment that Partyka countered belonged to her because of their business partnership. And there was also a jade collection worth $5,000. In the end, both women lost. Judge Kaufman ruled that neither woman received the administrative appointment of the estate, which he granted to the California Trust Company. But in the end, the important question is if Partyka murdered Beth or took part in it. Did Bayley lose it and kill Beth in a fit of rage? Did Partyka use this to her advantage, and both placed the body where it would strike the fear of God into Ruth Bayley? In the Killer Profiles episode, I included a profile by Alice LaVere. I recently came across another profile by LaVere different from that on derangedlacrimes.com. In this profile, LaVere speculated that the killer was a woman. She said,
"Murders leave behind them a trail of fingerprints, bits of skin and hair. The slayer of the Black Dahlia left the most telltale clue of all, the murder pattern of a degenerate, vicious feminine mind. Police investigators should look for a woman older than the Black Dahlia. This woman who either inspired the crime or actually committed the ghastly, unspeakable outrage need not be a woman of great strength. Extreme emotion or high mental tension in men and women give great, superhuman strength."
Join me next week for the final wrap-up of the Black Dahlia investigation.